All righty, righty. Thank you. We are live. This is Myki Angeline here with the Bad Filipino, and I have to tell you, this by far is going to be the most historical, coolest. I'm going to try not to cry episode ever because I have the team with Ahead of the Curve documentary focusing on the Curve magazine. Can we all just breathe for a moment and just like take this in? And I appreciate your team reached out to me to interview you because they saw me doing the photo when I got my physical copy. Thank you so much for that. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking time to be here.
Thank you.
So great to have us. And it was really cool to see your your shot with the cover of the film.
Oh yes, I had to. It's like I was telling you earlier before we went live, and I know you probably hear this all the time, and hopefully it doesn't get tiring to hear it, how much you and your movement and your decision to make this magazine impacted so many lives, even the ones you never hear about, right? You know, it was like, this is not a thing. This is really a thing. Oh my gosh, I have to check this out. And I knew I wanted to support it by buying it and owning it because I'm that generation. I want physical things, even though I know about the stream and stuff like this is streaming. And so thank you again.
Thanks. We're really honored to be here.
So let's start off. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I just like it's so cool because we have so many things in common.
Oh my gosh, we do. And we'll touch in that. We'll start off with why and how the documentary became to be, and then we can go kind of back in time and back and forth with our little stories on it. So what prompted the decision to go ahead with this amazing documentary?
That was me. I married this extraordinary woman. I knew she had started this magazine, but I didn't know all the stories behind it. And in the first years of our relationship, getting to know each other, she would tell me little things like, once I got sued by Catherine Deneuve, or, oh yeah, I sometimes would have to go to loan sharks to make payroll, or, in order to get the money to start the magazine, I took out 12 credit cards in one day, cashed them out, and went to the racetrack and bet on the horses and won 3 times in a row. Like these kinds of stories, my mind was exploding. I thought, this is such a great story. This would make a wonderful fiction film. I'm going to write a screenplay for it. So I started researching for the screenplay, and I realized that I was having a hard time finding our stories, queer women's histories, in nonfiction, like that were just documented. And I felt a real imperative to make this film as a documentary, at least first. So that's how it started. And it was just meant to be the historical story. It was just meant to be from the time that Franco was outed until the name change of the magazine. But, things happen while you're making a movie.
It was so much more, and I loved every second of it.
Thank you.
I think, I can't even, I'm saying you interviewed so many people, and you showed how it had impacted different people in their different walks of life, those that came forward and shared that information. In fact, here, let me see. I can, while we're talking about it, let me share so you have your website. Here we go. We're going to do that. Because I want to show, let's see. I want to show, here we go. I wanted to show the fact that you have these amazing women in it as well that were involved, right? Look at all that. Oh, of course it is. Yes, it is. Everyone, it is. And your trailer is amazing. But then you have all of these women here. Denise, oh my gosh, her poem. I remember that. I remember when that first came out. And it was like, and then Michelle, I was like, all of this here, right? And I thought, so... Okay, so now we go back because I forgot that it was Deneuve before it was Curve, right?
Right. Yeah, a lot of people still never knew that.
Because it was like right in the smack beginning. It was before I came out. So it was, it would be in the history if you researched it, right? This was way before phones were smart and not too many people had home PCs. So Googling that kind of thing was kind of far in between, but I loved that. And then I didn't realize that you were sued over that by the actress, which was such an irony since she played a lesbian in, I was like, is there anything that you can share that wasn't in there without getting in legal trouble as to, what was the date of when you first received that notification that you were being sued?
Yeah, it was just, a normal day at the office, and then, you get a knock on the door. Francis Stevens, yes, you've been served, just like the movies. And I was like, this has got to be a joke. And I looked at it, I was like, no, this is definitely a joke. And then my editor came and she was like, yo, this is no joke. We're
My
full
goodness.
on being sued. Yeah.
My goodness. And she's, yeah, that was that. I can imagine how heart wrenching that must be because you went through such lengths and struggle to even get this going, and how important. Because I'm remembering you discussing how you got their subscriptions, and you mailed them out yourself. Correctly, you had a team
Right.
in your office.
A team. All my friends from the club, come on down, let's stuff some envelopes.
In your office.
Yes,
also.
which was my living room at the beginning.
Right. I remember you pointed out your apartment. I mean, everywhere you were in San Francisco, I'm like, oh my God, I remember that play. Oh my God, I remember that. I remember that. And and this is, I mean, because like I had to dig them out. I don't have any old ones. Like the oldest one I have is from 2009, right? But I still have them, right?
Yeah.
I was like trying to dig these up because
it's cool that you still have those.
Oh my gosh.
We don't even have every copy, and we're trying to archive them right now.
Right, for the Curve Foundation, which we'll make sure we touch on before we end out. And it's interesting because you also talked about Different Light Bookstore.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever go there back in the day?
That's where I got this.
Oh, snap.
I even have the original receipt.
Oh my gosh.
January 13th, 1998.
Oh. Wow.
Right, I'm telling you, goosebumps.
Yeah.
Goosebumps when I found this stuff.
Working there at the time.
And she was the first mainstream celebrity you were able to get on the cover.
That's right.
Which is amazing because I work for the Women's International Music Network and we honored her in 2018. And I want you to know I haven't washed the shirt since that she touched.
I don't
when
blame
she
you.
Agreed to do a selfie with me. And it was like, oh my God, it was the song Silent Legacy from her Yes I Am that did it for me. And I still cry to this day when I hear that song. But I thought, oh my gosh, this is so serendipitous because it's Melissa Etheridge's book. When I first came out in 97 and I was frequenting Castro like every weekend, you buy up stuff. And I remember seeing that and the song. And I thought, you did not work there. This is crazy. What?
I did. And, talking about Melissa, not only was she gracious enough to agree to be the first celebrity on our cover, but she was the first celebrity to say yes to doing the movie. And I'm so jealous because Jen and Rivka and the whole crew got to go down to her house and hang out in her living room and film literally in her living room, right?
Stop it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with
I'd be jealous
stars
too.
all over the wall. Yeah, she's incredibly gracious and really, I think she understands the weight of her endorsement and she uses it for good over and over. Yeah.
That's so good. When she did her acceptance speech and she had said that and you captured this in your documentary, how so many people wouldn't play her music. She was told, thank you, but we already have a woman in rotation. So we in the music industry are always fighting because women, even to this day, when you listen, majority of the music you hear, whether it's been produced, performed, sung, it's male oriented. Mm-hmm. You might hear one or two females every hour or two. And to know that back then she was being shut down because they had a woman, just one in rotation. Right. And that was the mid 90s.
Yeah.
It's not much different now. And when she said that, the room just got quiet. And I thought, and I'm sitting here watching, do you even know how much harder it was for her? Because she was also out at that time when she was circulating that particular album. So whatever. But yeah, you're right. She understands the weight of that. And it's so great that I think it made sense that it was her, that she was the first one, to be quite honest. Like the universe just said, she needs to be the first one. Be patient. This is going to happen.
A crazy story too, Jen. Do you know this? I don't know, Myki, if you know the story. Jen, will you tell it? How we got Melissa? Because
please tell it.
Because I made a ginormous mistake. Yeah, it was.
Which you never do.
Oh, that's actually not true at all. But
she's a Virgo. You're pretty you don't make many mistakes, if any. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very kind. These are my favorite people here on this call with me. So I was trying to psych myself up to reach out to some of the celebrities who had been on the covers of the magazine over the years to see if they would consider allowing us to interview them for the film. And it was late one night. I'd been working really hard all day, and I thought, okay, just do it. Just send a note off to Martina Navratilova's person, because Martina was the first celebrity on the cover of Curve magazine after it changed names. And I thought, I don't know why, I thought for some reason, like, Martina will say yes, this will be good. So I sent this very nicely crafted, like, hey, well, I hope you'll consider, this means a lot to us, earnest little note off. And I went to sleep, and I woke up early the next morning, and I had an email response. I thought, woohoo! I opened it up, and it said, I do not now, nor have I ever represented Martina Navratilova. And that was it. And I was like, ugh! But I know this is the right person. So I went through and I looked, and then it became clear. I had sent the ask for Martina to Melissa Etheridge's manager.
Oh, okay. Wrong
so
M.
Rivka freaked out, complete meltdown.
At like 6 in the morning.
And
You were
then,
like,
yeah, very, very early.
pretty early.
And then crafted some kind of oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Must have been the evil email gremlins that got me, can't explain it, but I meant to reach out to you anyways, because of course, Melissa was on the cover a bunch of times and really would love it if she would consider. And I thought, well, I just shot myself in the foot. I know this person will never respond. 15 minutes later, the person responded and said, oh yeah, I talked to Melissa. She'll totally do it. And I thought, oh, it just happened.
Oh, saving grace. Thank goodness. Because the universe wanted you to reach out to Melissa. You just didn't know it yet.
Apparently.
Oh, yeah.
She needed to be the first. Yeah.
Yes.
She needed to be the first.
Absolutely. And I love how you're, okay, so taking it back, and I know it's in the previews and stuff, and everyone please watching. Oh, by the way, we had love all of you ladies. That's so sweet.
Aww.
The fact that when you realized, Franco, that you needed to do this magazine, and we're talking, was it 90 or 91 when you launched it?
It was 91.
Okay.
When the first issue came out. Yeah.
So people paying attention way before smart anything. Like everything was boots to the grounds and getting out there and getting seen. Because honestly, like I pulled these out too. When I came out, it was Advocate, right? And these
Is that a
2001?
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, because I think we came out right before the Advocate. I mean, out or around the same time. But when Deneuve first came out, Advocate just didn't say lesbian on the front cover.
No.
I remember that.
And then predominantly it's men. Isn't it crazy? No matter how you identify, whether it's gay, straight, non-binary, pansexual, it's men. And it was mostly my gays that, the only lesbians I were with, I usually were sleeping with. So like my friends were the gays, and it was just always, that was, Queer as Folk was huge, and one lesbian couple, I think, in that whole series. And so, it was like, and then finally I come across Curve, and I was like, so it wasn't Deneuve at the time, it was Curve.
Okay.
And like you even mentioned, it was representing as a community, not sexualizing it like out and Advocate, right? Which now we have Grindr. But you really, it was so important to feel represented, to know, because women just weren't in ads, weren't in TV, just even whether you identified, as queer or not. And when I finally discovered that, I couldn't get enough of it, honestly. And I just read everything and soaked it all up, because it opened up a world for me being in Vacaville and Fairfield, even before coming to Sacramento. Those were smaller towns. I think chatting on the internet became popular in 98, 99. And there were some people that would disguise their names because they were coming from small towns and states where they would be ostracized for even admitting they like the same sex. In fact, you covered in your documentary, Denise does her advocacy with the youth. And I don't even know how new that is, because it looked pretty recent. But you had a young person actually saying her mother told her she wished she would have aborted her if she knew she were gay. So this is a situation that still exists.
2 years ago.
See that? That's horrific.
Yeah.
That's horrific that youth are dealing with that. So, and you were careful to mail them in plain manila, so people didn't know they were getting it.
Exactly.
That was important too. And people could just escape with this. And they could just, probably cry. Like we would laugh all the time and cry and look at stuff and just, okay, so we're going to move on to this. Now, horses is your thing. How did you know to go to bet on, like, when it came to trying to get the money?
Right.
And you did all the credit cards. So clever. I'm sure no one can get away with that now, obviously. The fact that you filled out every single form on the same day to get approved, because everybody had been, they were like, here, take the credit. We want you to spend money. How did you know that going to the track would do it versus going to a casino versus whatever else?
Well, there was no casino around here, so I wasn't going to drive to Nevada to do it. But my history with horse racing kind of goes back to my childhood when my dad used to own some race horses, and I would work at the track mucking stalls and, cleaning horses and picking hooves and riding whenever I could. So, I went to the track every morning to work, and I listened to what the guys had to say, and I looked at how they looked at horses. And I didn't know that I was going to win. I knew it was a gamble. And the first race, I was just like, there was a heavy long shot. There was a heavy favorite. And I just looked at the horse and I was like, that horse doesn't even look sound. Well, how is this horse? Like, so, I just picked a few other horses and I got lucky. And then I parlayed that into the next race. And I think more than luck, it was just actually meant to be. It was with the magazine, it always seemed like the right thing came along. It's like when we needed an editor just found us. When we needed a graphic design person, somebody reached out to us. That was like a perfect fit. It just, it was just meant to be.
I agree. And now knowing your background with horses, obviously you were going to win. You were able to look at the horse and go, something ain't right. We're not picking that horse. Like, you knew. And you're right. People have been waiting to do something like this. So when it got into their, their news feed, so to speak, that you existed, you probably had a flood of people wanting to be a part of something so great. They just knew it was going to be so great and just so well needed. Even, because, like, here we go again. I still have my original time from Matthew Shepard. Yeah.
Wow.
The original time. That hit hard. Even you covered that in your documentary because, oh my gosh. And it was, it was, what is that? At least almost 17 years after the AIDS epidemic first started. And then even through, because when I know we're jumping all over the place, but you're bringing back so much when COVID first hit, every way that the presidency and people were attacking Asian community over blaming it to be a China virus, I was flipped back to AIDS epidemic and Reagan calling it the gay virus. Yep. And so many, queers being attacked, being blamed. And so, and then when something like that happens, more than ever, you need your community, and you clearly had it. This documentary really shows that. And then when you skip ahead to your being sued and throwing that fundraiser, and you had so many people come forward to want to help and donate and be a part of that, and that was in San Francisco.
That was cool.
To be there, I can't. I was just trying to imagine what it'd been like just to be in that room and feel all of that love and support and purpose. Right?
It was very powerful.
Yeah.
Back then, before the internet, the only way to reach the women, was really to go from town to town and put the magazine into the hands of the potential readers and watch the expression on their face when they realize, like, I can see myself in this thing. I still to this day am surprised when people say, oh, this, saved me, it changed my life. It just touches me so much to know that I made such a huge difference to so many women on their journey.
And you went on the road. I loved that. You had your little microphone. You were even talking with people, making them a part of it. And that had to, as fun as that looked, that had to have been exhausting.
I think we were energized, but by the whole, like, camaraderie in it. so we would literally drive like 600 miles in a day. We'd make the first stop at like a bookstore and do like a reading from the magazine, and then a cocktail party. We'd have dinner at some reader's house where she's invited all of her friends so that they could learn about it. And then after that, it was off to the clubs to try and circulate the magazine. It was ultimately exhausting, driving 7,000 miles on a road trip and sleeping, in a van or in a Motel 6 or,
And how many states have you visited?
I've been to 49 states.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Oh, wait. And how are you going to get to that last state, Franco?
I think my gorgeous wife, Jen, has said she's going to take me there for my birthday, but it's too cold right now. So
When it warms
So
up.
that's the only hint I'm
Wait,
giving
which
you.
state?
I'm not
Oh.
telling you. I'm not telling
Okay.
you. There's only
Okay.
one state left.
Okay.
And, I do this. I just started this group called the Curve Community on Facebook. And
I need to follow it. Okay. I'm going to find it.
Yeah. It's just a fleggling, it's just been up for a couple weeks, and it's really a way to deepen the connection, for women. And, I put on there a quiz, like, how many states have you been to? I've been to 49, and I let people guess, which is the last state that I haven't been to, and nobody's been able to guess yet. So.
Wow. Man, you were like doing road trip like a musician would,
Oh, except, like a grunge, like not a musician with a big fancy, when I say van, I mean minivan.
Oh, no, trust. I've been so involved in the SAC music scene here since 2007. There have been artists that totally believed in their craft, and they would quit their jobs, give up their apartments, get the broken down 1981 Dodge van and live in it and trek and do whether they slept in the van, fans would offer their floor,
Totally.
because their money was, if I could sell merch, there's gas money to get to the next town. So that's what you were. I mean, you were just grinding it. But even as exhausting as it was, it had to have been so rewarding every time you hit a town and the faces just light up and the love that you feel, because they're like, she is representing us and she's giving us a voice, and we now are relevant and have purpose and,
Sure.
all
And
of
think
that.
it, like, I was young and I was single, so, there wasn't anything bad about that, let's just say.
Never.
You know what I mean.
I sure do.
Yeah.
Oh, I do.
So let's bring it back to the movie, because I'm so excited that Jen and Rivka made this movie. I was pretty apprehensive at the beginning. Jen kind of had to talk me into it, because I'd rather be behind the scenes and not, in front of the camera is kind of a awkward and vulnerable place for me. She was really committed to it. Like, just when I decided I'm going to make the magazine, Jen decided she was going to make the film, and there was no stopping her. And then how did you bring Rivka in, Jen?
Rivka and I had been friends for a long time. She's an accomplished filmmaker, and I dared to dream that maybe she would consider coming on and helping me with this project. And I think, Rivka, you might not, I don't know that you remember it this way, but the first time I mentioned it to you, you're like, oh yeah, you should, let me think if I can think of anybody who would be a good producer for you. And like a year went by. That was when I first was just starting to do pre-interviews, and 70 pre-interviews later, we're driving across the Bay Bridge to a friend's party. And I said, I really need a producer now. Now I know what the next steps are. I have absolutely no idea how to do them. I need somebody who knows what they're doing to come on and help me. And I still didn't really think she was going to say yes, but she did.
and please, Rivka, share how your valuable contribution came to making this fruition.
Oh, well, so I have known Frank and Jen for many years before this, and I do, now that you say it, remember that initial conversation. But, sometimes people say things and who knows. So this next time when you mentioned that you had done so many pre-interviews and you had this, and you also dropped a few other stories where I was like, that sounds like a real movie. I was like, you know, and I remember you said you really need a producer. And I was like, well, have you asked this producer? You're like, is this happening? And so I remember it happened right when we were crossing the Bay Bridge. And then when we got to San Francisco, I think we were making a movie together.
It kind of sounds like a lesbian relationship. You spot each other in the bar, you know each other, but nobody wants to make the first move, but you know it's a perfect match. I'm very secure in my relationship with both of these women, and I have nothing but good feelings about their making movies together. So I'm glad it was meant to be too. There you go.
And did you find any obstacles or struggles you had to overcome in producing the film? I mean, that you would like to share?
How many? Every single day.
Yeah.
It was so easy. Everything just fell into
Even
place.
a cave woman should do it.
I mean, the truth is a lot of things really did fall in place.
It's true. Yeah. We hit a lot of flow. Yeah.
By far, I would say the biggest challenge was my own lack of experience. I did not know how to make a movie. And so for me, it was like a daily masterclass. Oh, well, like, tell me about the different lenses that you're talking about, and what do you mean depth of field, and what do you mean, like.
Can I stop you there, Jen? Because you do not give yourself enough credit for being in the movie, in the film industry for more for a long time.
But not in this role.
Not in this role. So this role was new, and you did have a master class.
Yeah, you did. But also, like, really, you understood storytelling, and that's the most important part. All the other tech stuff is easy to learn. Bringing crews on, we had an 100% female non-binary people crew, a lot of folks queer, LGBTQ+. And we also really wanted to help mentor other women and non-binary people because, like many other industries, it's totally male dominated and has been for years and years and years. So, I mean, it's kind of ironic that in the news right now, there's a story on another film where the cinematographer was shot and killed, and it's horrible. I mean, the chances that was a female cinematographer, I was like, oh, you must be kidding. It's still so rare for that to happen. So in this film, and kudos to you, Jen, because I remember you were saying like, no, it needs to be 100%. I was like, well, what about like 99%?
Yeah, we had that conversation repeatedly, actually.
We did because some of the we had a really, for a documentary, we really wanted to have a high production value, because especially too many queer films about women are just not super well resourced, and we wanted to shift that because it ripples across the whole film's opportunity to make an impact in the world. It's and also
like the magazine, right? I mean,
just like the magazine, right? Yeah. And Frank, talk about that a little bit, because why did you make this magazine that would sit next to other magazines, right? And why did you?
I always had in mind, in my mind that I wanted it to be color and glossy and professional, and to say, you, the reader, are worth it. You're worth, the expensive printing, and I wanted to have something that you could leave out on your coffee table. So if your, family member walked by, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, let me get this off the table. Like, I really don't want them to see that. I just wanted it to be validating,
Oh, you knocked it out of the park with that. Absolutely. It's, and you talked about even going back on producing, because the importance of having everyone be part of the community, not only for representation, but just the ones telling the story and the point of view. I mean, like, because things coming up in my post, you referred to the movie that just happened with the cinematographer who was shot and killed. The whole thing with the trans community, especially the trans community of color, who were protesting, Netflix. And it wasn't as the cancel culture. It's because of the fact that they're trying to be this forward-thinking company, but the people they're claiming that they're supporting aren't in the roles that make the decisions for the company or even benefit with money and whatnot. I mean, someone had shared that I shared with it said in 2020, the Times wrote 324 articles about trans people and trans issues, but 0 of them were actually written by trans people. This is why it's so important what you did. Because
this is why it's so important that we tell our own stories.
Yes.
Because nobody's going to tell the story like we can tell it.
Absolutely.
Nobody's going to tell your story like you can tell it. Nobody can tell Rivka's story or Jen's story. We don't need somebody othering us and, reporting from an outside lens.
Because we've had enough of that already.
Yeah. I mean, let me say this. It's important that our issues get covered.
Yes.
But, we have to do it in a way that, we have our own voices.
Yes. And real quick, Booger was like, great memories, aren't they though? I'm telling you, we're not going to be here forever, but we obviously could be because we've got so many years with the history, with all of this. And so you wanted to touch on the importance of inclusion with your magazine and how it developed over time when you saw that there was a need with each passing year, right?
Sure. Well, our goal was always to be as inclusive as possible. Whether that be, because of the color of your skin, your age, your physical abilities. I remember the 3rd issue of the magazine, we put a woman who was over 60. Oh my God, she was like an ancient lesbian on the front cover. And it almost bankrupted us because people were like, I won't buy that. They wouldn't say I wouldn't buy that, but it wasn't like you think of a magazine cover girl like as sexy and beautiful. And, we'd put like Giselle Garcia, the dancer from, the iconic Club Q on the front cover, and people would just be snatching that thing up.
Yep.
But it was always a struggle because, black and brown women really were in such a hard place back then. Coming out was, incredibly difficult. Just the pressure from family and from religious aspects. And, there's nothing more out and loud and proud than being in a magazine that says lesbian right on the front cover. So
Absolutely.
We really tried to be respectful of people. And if they didn't want to be included, we wouldn't include them. And we learned through the years that like, if we wanted readers to, digest some of the harder topics, the best thing to do would be to put somebody that they resonated with on the cover so that they would pick it up and take it home. And then they would read through the magazine and, I didn't, if we had put a thing about, coming out in the military as the front cover, they may or may not have read it. Because there were a lot of stories about that at the time, but how many of them were coming from a distinctive queer woman's point of view? Not many.
Absolutely. And they put themselves a target on the back when they decide to come forward in something like that as well. I mean, not that it doesn't happen now because it does, but back then, 30 years ago, that just,
we could have always, I just want to say we could have done better for sure. Looking back in hindsight, we could always do better. I really respect and admire how Jen and Rivka brought in such diversity when producing the film. The women we profiled in the movie, or that they profiled in the movie, or that we found just by like, hey, who are the movers and the shakers that are young and making waves today? My God, they are powerful, and they are beautiful in their own right, diverse, and then you had me, the main subject, and I'm in a wheelchair, so.
Oh yeah, I'm learning from them all the time because I'm realizing, and let's touch on you had a very good section of the documentary that focused on identifying with the word lesbian versus queer. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the age difference with it. And for me, I'm old school lesbian. It is our word. I use queer as in to identify the community who are not straight.
Right.
End of story. Which I even thought about that today. And I'm like, why do we use the word straight? Because straight almost feels like that's what's normal and everything else isn't. Like I'm going.
In my book, you're queer unless you come out to me as something else. So
there you go.
There you go.
There you go. And so that's why, like, even on my where I identify with my social media, I put queer so folks know that I'm part of the community. But when you ask me, I identify as lesbian because that's our word.
What do you
And
feel about like words like, dyke or
so
full,
that's interesting
full
because
dyke or
I've
I don't
been
know what?
called that in derogatory terms. That's been shouted at. I'm very fortunate that I've never been physically assaulted. And I have a martial arts background. So part of like the many things that I do is I teach self-defense to women
Oh,
and young
good,
women.
good for you. That's
I
awesome.
volunteer a lot of that, and I come from the basics. Like you don't have to be a martial artist to learn it. I teach you how to be aware, and that every day your own body and just being you can use in your defense. And in situations like one thing I taught about is like if you're at home, and whether it's your partner's brother who's a jerk, he happens to be over for dinner, and then when your partner's out of sight, he's trying to fill you up because it happens. Well, if you're chopping up squash and you haven't chopped it yet, you could use that to defend yourself. And it's a piece of vegetable, but it's hard and it will hurt and it will send the message. It's just things like that.
Yeah.
And so
I thought you meant the knife you were chopping the
no,
squash with.
no, because you don't
Okay.
want to go to jail, right? So
Right.
I'm teaching you there's subtle ways to let someone know it's not cool. I mean, and you have to know how to escalate and de-escalate the force. Using knives, absolutely. But and so I've had people call me that, Dyke. But in our circle, back in the the 90s and the early 2000s, dyke was as a type. So when we used it in our circle, when it wasn't a derogatory term,
Sure.
and then there's like there's the they called back in our days stone butch, whereas what that meant. And so there was just different, and I tried to figure out what I gotta have one, and I would try to figure it out. And I'm like, I'm a sporty lesbian because I grew up doing sports since I was like 6, and I've been on teams and done all American this and that. So I thought, well, I'm a sporty lesbian, but I kind of like, and this is before I even like did the whole shave, because I still like to wear makeup, but I had really long hair for like the longest time. And so then I was like, I'm a sporty femme. And like all these titles, you're just trying to figure out where you fit in.
Right.
But today, I don't even know what the younger folks, dyke isn't even a term used. I think that's our generation.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think so. We're still kind of like feeling it all out. And interestingly enough, our son, who's now 19, when they were making the movie was, like what, 15, 16, 17, like 17, 18, however old he was, he was a great resource that we could say, hey, call up your friends, find out what terms they're using, what terms they're comfortable with. And he's like, I know you say lesbian is a thing of the past, but my friends totally use that, and they're like 16 years old. So,
Yeah, that was a lovely surprise.
That's so good. Well, my daughter, she came out age 14 as asexual lesbian. And so she uses the term lesbian, and ace, I guess, is the nickname I believe for that. But and it's like in my generation going to school, you never talked about that. I can't think of one moment at all through all of my grades up to graduating did anyone ever admit, whereas even in the last maybe 8 or more years, kids were being brave enough to come out in like middle school.
Yeah,
a lot.
So we know the times are changing, that at least representation is there, but the danger is still as relevant as ever.
Rivka, do you ever ask your kids like what, tell
All
us what,
yeah,
if they're younger?
Yeah, well, so I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, and one of them identifies as pan, the other identifies as straight, but they have all kinds of friends, and they really embrace so many different sexualities and genders, and they flip pronouns pretty easily. There's always they have friends who are shifting their pronouns. So yeah, it's really fluid. It's a fluidity, especially with gender, and because they're still in like elementary school and middle school. It's less focused on sexuality right now with them. But yeah, it's so fluid, and they have no reluctance or there's not a stigma attached to conversation, which I love.
I love that too.
Yeah.
I think that's so also kudos to you.
Well, they have a really open kind of conversation. I'm in a 20-year marriage with a man I love so much, and I have a girlfriend too, and that's like a situation that they've known about for a couple of years now, and
they're learning it in a very healthy, positive manner as well. So that's wonderful. I think a lot of what's different too, I've noticed, and this even happens with the BLM movement, with Asian hate, with homophobia, transphobia, is that it's easier to put people on blast for it now. The cell phone has been the greatest weapon towards outing folks that are being dangerous or violent towards any community. And so, they've got to think twice before their racism, their homophobia, they decide to air it. They don't always think twice, but definitely more than 30 and 20 years ago. So it's
both ways, right? Because and this is something that I think we talked about with Kim Cattrall often in the film, that visibility doesn't necessarily equal safety. So we talk about increasing visibility and positive visibility, right? Like a fully dimensional characters. But it also doesn't necessarily equate to safety, right? So, I mean, we see like Black trans women being killed at unprecedented rates still, and trans visibility has escalated so much in the last 10 years. Yeah.
And to be honest, do we know that because how much of it was being reported 20 years ago?
Right.
True.
So that's where it's, we talked about that, and I had a very old podcast, and the conversation on police brutality came up because the movie Straight Outta Compton had just been released. I can watch that one over and over again. And, someone brought up in the conversation about how, in the 50s and the 60s, they always emulated that cops were your hero and they were getting cats out of trees and up. And I go, yeah, but was it really? Or was that the image that they put forward because nobody called them on their shit?
Or the people that are saying that are the people that were actually protected.
Correct. And so even now as that's kind of the challenge we take and the safety that we risk, being out. I'm very fortunate for me because not only do I work for the Women's International Music Network, I work at Odyssey, and I work at 98 Rock here in Sacramento, and both companies are very, very supportive of however you identify. We're very inclusive. I belong to the DEI task force, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I know I'm fortunate because there are still companies that don't celebrate that. And they won't tell you, but that's why they'll fire you or not hire you. I have platforms that I can be open, and I know that I'm being watched, whether I'm told or not, just like the three of you and what you do in your fields, because they still risk being attacked, being killed, not being hired, being all the things. You're right. Absolutely. But
it's got to start at home too. I mean,
it does.
Are your family, how are they? Are they supportive?
Me?
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying,
you and I, we have such the parallels, right? Because I came out after being married and having a kid. And so I lost more than half of my family who couldn't relate. We're very on the religious sector of, well, you can come over, but don't bring your girlfriend, or didn't want to talk about it, or ghosted. And some of my friends, but then what happens is, and that's such a transition because you're not the only one coming out. They have to as well.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, yes.
My mother, who I'm very close to, it hit her hard because she didn't see it coming. And we were so close. I think she felt sort of an ego bruise and hurt as a mom that she didn't see it. And even recently she admitted to me maybe 3 years ago, she's like, I'm so sorry. I really just can't accept this about you. And she loves me. And I don't even take offense to it because she was raised in a time where that wasn't something that was normal or raised around. She would say, I had a daughter, but now I have a son, because when I would cut my hair, because for her growing up, this isn't a girl. And at least she was honest with me about it, and she doesn't shun me. We still talk on the phone a lot. She's disabled, and it's a whole different, I'm not even going to bring that into this conversation, but the one thing, if anyone watching, when they ask that question, when you're first coming out, when you lose people, I tell them it'll hurt, but you're shedding people who never supported you to begin with, because they just liked you because you were like them. You're going to find your real family, whether that's blood or not, who see you for who you are inside. Because they're struggling. And this is definitely, it goes when I have family members that have transitioned into from female to male, and then their siblings are having trouble with that because they were raised having a sister their whole life. And you see photos, you're talking about it, right? Photos are on the wall, and it's like, yeah, that they're transitioning too, but it's not your responsibility if you're the one transitioning. They have to come around in their own time if they do or not. And so that's the biggest lesson I took from all of this when I lost the people that I did, is that that's their struggle. That's not mine, and it doesn't hurt any less. But I now found people, my community and folks that celebrate
Your chosen
that.
family.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and that was the same for you. You were so bold to show that in the documentary.
Yeah. And my parents totally came around, and my mom, I must say, she's now like my biggest cheerleader.
That's so good. Because, man, when you talked about the phone call and you asking for money and she says, I can't help you, I was like, oh, knife to my heart.
Yes. Like,
I have no more money for you. I'm like, that you chose to not give your daughter money over that. She isn't robbing a bank. She didn't kill people. She's not.
I think what it was really about, now that I look back at it, she just spent an incredible amount of her life savings on a wedding for me only a few years before.
Gotcha.
And how could I have done that if I knew that I was lesbian? And lo and behold, I had no idea.
No.
I didn't know.
Neither did I.
Looking back at my old photos, like, how did I not know?
You did that too? Oh my gosh. Isn't it like, oh, now that makes sense. Oh, now that makes sense, totally. Right? Oh, you do that for like 2 years straight.
Yeah, I still do it. Jen went back through every photo I ever took and kept for the movie. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
That had to have been fun watching all that come up because Jen, Rivka, you did such an amazing, I mean, give yourself the credit, Jen, because you are an absolutely fabulous storyteller. Even if I weren't queer and I'm watching this for the first time, it felt like that helps folks really understand. It's a piece in our history. It's a very important piece in our history. And you go from then to now and you're showing the struggle, but you're showing it in a light where it isn't depressing. It's more of, this is just how it was. And this is how we overcame it. And now here we are today. Right. You know, it's beautiful.
They've used that as a launch pad to create their own production company. So I know. Make sure.
I love it.
Jen,
talk about that, please.
About that and what projects you have in the works.
Please talk.
Absolutely, yeah. So we just loved the work. We loved work. We worked together really, really well, and we're very, very aligned in our values around telling stories that center strong queer women. There just aren't enough that are out there, that are well told, that are, there's just, I have a huge hunger for it. Rick has a huge hunger, and we know we're not the only ones. So we've been continuing to write and make films. We've got a short documentary that we've just started submitting to festivals. That's about a butch presenting queer mom of a profoundly disabled 7-year-old boy, and her path to understanding how to be his mom. And I'm completely in love with it. It's called Holding Moses. And we've been writing. We have a short fiction film that we're writing. We have a feature-length romantic comedy that we're swimming around in. And we wrote a pilot for an episodic that's based on a fictionalized version of the early years of Deneuve magazine and the incredibly sexy golden time in San Francisco, where these brash young women just wanted it into existence, worked their little butts off, and had a lot of fabulous sex. And
I think that was like the first season of L Word back in 2004. It's all sex.
Yeah, except San Francisco, and not all skinny femmes. Yeah, and
realistic. Everybody includes everybody.
Yeah, and activism. Lots of activism.
I must say the L Word Generation Q is a lot better in the diversity range.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree. I just
David-
binged, well, not binged, but I just finished season 2, and I loved how they included the old school with the original actors, and then brought in the newer characters, and the diversity was really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with the
Yeah,
daughter struggling with wanting to meet her dad and whatnot. Like, that is real
No
stuff.
spoilers. I haven't finished watching the season. Okay, thanks.
No spoilers. Oh, I usually don't, but I just
Okay.
meant, like, they
I
touch on
didn't
that,
know
right?
yeah.
They just, I just love that they brought it, especially, and anytime Alice or Shane or Bet would have their conversations that obviously reflected from before, I love, because, their first season was, or the first go around, I remember all of that. I have them on DVD. And so I love that they brought them back and kept them in the core. That was so fabulous. But
Yeah.
you're going to
I
go,
think they were actually some of the producers, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
I think so.
I think they
Yes.
came back as like, it was there. I
Yeah.
think it was Jennifer Beals who was like, let's bring the show back. But I don't know
Absolutely.
for sure. Yeah.
And which episode are you on?
I think I'm only up to like 4.
So you're halfway there. Okay.
I took a break because on that Facebook page I was telling you about the Curve community, somebody suggested some shows that I was like, oh, I gotta watch that. Oh, I gotta watch that.
What did
It's
you end up
almost-
watching?
I'm watching Sex Education, and I really liked that show. And I watched Vita, and the sex in that was great. And I haven't even.
You know what one I totally loved?
What?
Sex Life. Because Sarah Shahi's in it, and she was Carmen.
Oh my God, she's so hot.
That is my future ex-wife. Handle.
Yeah.
So I love her, and I watched that. It's so good because you just really get involved in the characters. It's number one, it's very diverse in its representation with the characters, but they really do the meat and bones with her being a woman, a wife with her kids, and she's a great mother, but she knows she's missing something. And the back, like the writing and her portraying it, and then the sex is good too.
Called Sex Life.
It's called Sex/Life, I think. Just Google Sarah Shahi and sex, and it'll pop
Of
up.
course.
So good.
She's been a Curve cover girl a few times.
Yes, she has. I love her so much. Oh, okay, we're getting off it now. Okay, but as we
Also
close this
behind
out,
all of our TV watching.
so as we close this out, you had talked also towards the end of it
Sorry.
about, do we stay a physical representation? Do we flip it over to just streaming? And you do have Curve Foundation, but you're still circulating the physicals, yeah?
No.
No,
we're
it
not
is done.
We're
Okay.
not printing magazines at this point.
Okay.
Not to say that will never happen again, but right now we're online, and people can go to curvemag.com and check it out and look at the different lens we're taking on some of the stories from the old days of Curve and how they, how we shine a light on what those are doing today. And then we've started a nonprofit called the Curve Foundation, which is to continue the original mission of Curve Magazine, highlighting our stories and giving back to the community. And we donated Curve Magazine to the foundation, so it's actually a nonprofit now. So if anybody wants to donate, it's tax deductible.
Nice.
And so the Curve Foundation is thecurvefoundation.org if anybody wants to check it out. And we have our first year of Curve awardees that we've allotted a financial award to. So we're giving money to LGBTQ women to write stories that are emerging journalists. And then the other thing I think I mentioned before is that we're archiving the first 30 years of the iconic Danube and Curve magazines.
Yes.
So we're trying to get all the copies. That's,
That's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But that's so essential. I see you launching a 30th or 35th anniversary, thick old book.
Yeah, right?
Like I have the original Pride from 98 when Ellen
Who's on
first
the
came
cover?
out.
Ellen. Oh, right.
Yeah, that was when she came out on her show, remember?
Yeah, I do.
I'm gay.
I was there. Yep.
I recorded that on VCR. But
Wow.
your book will be probably this thick
Yeah.
with all yours, and yes, and that will definitely be worth having. Yes. In fact, I feel bad. I don't know if I've subscribe, so I will, to the online.
Yeah, it's free, so there's
And,
nothing to pay for. So
no,
now that
absolutely.
we're a nonprofit, it's
Love it.
even the archive will be completely free. I think it's really important that women can search, or anybody can search, you know, the archives of Danube and Curve and see where our community's gone over the last 30 years. It's, you know, it's
Can't believe it's
historical.
been 30 years. That's like the 90s were 20 years ago. Like that just blows my mind. Like me being in high school is music that you hear at the
90s
grocery
were
store
30
now.
years ago, my friend.
Yes, so sorry. That's what I meant. Like mine, the 80s being nearly 40 years ago. It, you know, that's the music that's playing at the grocery store now. And you're just like,
Skip again.
where's my commemorative stamp? Because I'm pretty sure I get that now. So any last words you'd like to share before we close out this episode, this
I want to
wonderful
make sure that
conversation?
Rivka and Jen say how you can buy the DVD and how you can watch the movie if you don't have a DVD player.
Sure. So yeah, our socials are all at Curve Mag Movie. So you can check out us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And if you go to our website, there's a whole link tree with several different ways to connect to the film.
I spelled that wrong.
Oh, you did?
Stars,
Yeah.
Apple, on Amazon. There's so many ways to see this film. So check
Perfect. Yes. Please, please. There it is. Please see this. It is so imperative that you see it. If you can own it, do so. If not, definitely see it. It's so worth it. It is so worth it. I'm probably going to watch it again. I'm home this weekend. We're up here in Sacramento. We're supposedly getting a bomb. What do they call it? Yes.
Yeah.
Like power might go out. We've got the Iron Man going here, so they're going to have to put weights and floaties to kind of get through it because we're supposedly getting a whole ton of rain tomorrow. Wow. So I'm probably just going to have this on repeat because it's that awesome.
The other thing I want to say is that it's so important, not just because, you know, independent film is hard to finance and keep making, but also if you support our film, it also sends a signal to Amazon, to Apple, to Stars that there's an audience desire for films about LGBTQ plus women. And that is huge because they look at their audience and they say like, hey, what does our audience want? And then they try to give them more. So actually buying our film helps bring more media, more film, more television about queer women to our televisions and our movie theaters. Yeah.
Perfect. You're 100%. 100%. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for joining me on this. I can't tell you how my life is just complete. I don't know how the rest of this year is going to get any better for being on the show. And again, like she says, please purchase, download the movie. It's awesome. This is Myki Angeline, and reminding you, like I always end every show, every day that you wake up, you determine how your day will go. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks.